Amen. Okay. Well, again, welcome everyone. Good morning. And just want to remind you, if you guys, one of the reasons that I'm, having these sessions each week is not just to review the assignment, but if you have any specific questions on your passage, bring the Proverbs passage you have, bring those questions with you, and I'd be happy to answer them. Or if there's anything else you guys want to talk about. Some of the other groups, certain topics just come up and we end up spending the whole time on that. In fact, the last week I was talking to one of the groups about suicide and sort of pastoral, how would you counsel a family or a person who's thinking about it, or a family who's experienced it, or other time we talked about worship, styles of worship, and just sort of what, how do you decide what's appropriate, say for a service. So there's other things too we can discuss if that would be helpful for you guys as well. Just want to bring that up to you so that, take advantage of this time that we're spending together to not only address the poetic passages that we're looking at and that you're going to be preparing to preach, but even too, just other things as well. But yeah, specifically, if you do have questions on your text, you can always use this time to ask. Okay, so I just wanted to encourage you with that, remind you of that. Today, the assignment we're looking at, it's assignment number 4 for your Proverbs passage. And it's the same as assignment number 3 that you did for your Psalms text. Okay, this is assignment 4 because we have one additional assignment for our Proverbs passage. So, okay, what happened to lost my screen sharing. Hold on a second here. What happened? Oh. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this is just the, and I'll post this example to you right after we're done here this morning. This is an example from Proverbs 1 that I'm going to show you for this particular assignment. But first, I wanted to just review a couple of the things for it, just to refresh your minds, because it's been a couple of months since we talked about this particular aspect of poetic analysis. And then look at Proverbs 1 together, verses 8 to 19 is what I'm using, and have you guys help me out with it as far as identifying some of the imagery, figurative language, and then we'll just go through that together. So by way of reminder, if you want to go back and refresh yourself, we spent 4 sessions actually on this part of poetic analysis. So you can go back to those sessions here, sessions 4 through 7. Here's the links to the recording of those sessions, and you can go back and review if you would like and see what we talked about then. But there are basically 3 steps in this analysis, in this procedure. The first step is to identify the imagery. Okay, identify the images within the poem. That's the first thing you want to do, because again, remember, Hebrew poetry is one of the primary features of Hebrew poetry, and most poetry, is to convey images, to describe things, to express certain principles as using an image of some sort. And we see that a lot in Hebrew poetry. And so with that imagery, you want to look for what are the pictures that the poet is describing to us, and what would those pictures, how would the initial audience have understood those pictures? What what's being described, don't just think of it how it impacts us in the present day, but we really first want to understand how would that image be understood by the original audience? And what emotions does that image bring out? All right, those are the kinds of things you want to ask when you're trying to identify images within the poem. And often a poem will have several images. Sometimes it will have an extended image, like one that's described over a number of verses, and other times it may just be a verse. And we'll see that in our example today, where just one verse, it gives us a little picture. Kind of like metaphors often do that, right? When Jesus said, "I am the door," well, right away in your mind, you think of a door. You picture a door in your mind. And so we, even just a short metaphor can express an image or a picture and communicate something through that. So that's the first step. Take your poem, go through it, and identify any images that seem to be conveyed in that poem. And then the second step, and this is the one that will probably take the most time, and that is to identify the figurative language within the poem. And so that is where you go through each verse in your poem and identify what figure of speech or what poetic expression, what figurative language does the poet use here. And so if you can remember, this is a summary of the various figures of speech that we see in Hebrew poetry. And as I mentioned before, I think some Old Testament scholars like identify 30 or 40 different figures of speech, and that's just too many. And really, these are the most common ones that you're going to see that we covered together. All right, so just by way of review, remember a very, very common figure of speech is the comparison, types of comparison, either the simile, where something is alike or as something else, or a metaphor where you would say something is something else, like Jesus saying, "I am the door." That's a metaphor. If Jesus said, "I am like a door," that would be a simile. Okay, and remember, a simile is the least direct comparison. A metaphor is a more direct comparison. So if you say, "I am like a door," that's not as strong as saying, "I am a door." And then an even stronger comparison is what we call the hypocatastasis. That is, it's directly stated, door, for example. All right, so look for those. Those are very common in Hebrew poetry, these figures of speech that are comparison. Now remember, a figure of speech just means this, that the words used are not literal. Right? So when Jesus said, for example, or Psalm 23, it's, David says that the Lord is my shepherd. Well, God isn't really a literal shepherd who has a staff and he goes and works with sheep. That's not what David was saying. So it's a figure of speech. In that case, it was a metaphor because he said, "The Lord is my shepherd." And what he's doing there is drawing a comparison between God and a shepherd. What does a shepherd do? This is what God does for us. All right, so keep that in mind. Comparisons, again, are very commonly used in Hebrew poetry. Another common thing we will see in Hebrew poetry, figure of speech, is hyperbole, right? Where it's excessive. Like I'm cry all the day, or all my enemies have surrounded me. That's exaggeration for emphasis. There's also a third type of figure of speech. We call it attributing features. That is to attribute or describe features of one thing using the features of something else. So personification is to describe a human characteristic for an inanimate object. Like if you were to say that the mountains sing or the trees clap. Okay, that's personification. Now, if you're using it in regards to God, if you say, God's eyes or the hand of the Lord, right? Those are anthropomorphisms. That's applying or describing a characteristic of God using a human characteristic. And then, of course, there's the zoomorphism, which is sometimes used when that's describing something about God using an animal's characteristic. Again, like the shelter under his wings, or describing the talons or the claws of the Lord, something like that. Okay? Another kind of common Hebrew figure of speech and Hebrew poetry is called substitution. And there's two kinds. One is called metonymy, and that is just where you use one thing to represent something else. Like if I were to say, let me put on my eyes, okay, like putting on my glasses. Now, I'm not putting my literal eyeballs in, right? That would be kind of gross, actually. But what I'm doing is I'm describing my glasses as something else. They represent my ability to see. So I would say, let me put on my eyes. Now, synecdoche is a little different. That is actually taking a part of something to represent the whole. So, you know, if I were to say, what would be an example? The hand of God moved. Okay. Well, that's actually two figures of speech, right? One, it's anthropomorphism, saying God has a hand. But also when you say the hand of God moved, well, it wasn't just his hand that moved. It was all of him that moved. So the hand is a synecdoche in that case. It's one part which represents the whole. Or if you were to describe like the nation of Israel, if you were to say Jacob went to war. Well, Jacob is just one part of the whole nation of Israel. So he represents the whole nation. That would be synecdoche. Actually, it's another more specific kind of substitution, but synecdoche is sufficient to describe that. Okay, so metonymy is one thing representing something else. Okay, it's two different things. Like the pen is mightier than the sword. Well, a pen you don't use to stab, but it represents a weapon of sorts. Whereas synecdoche is a part of an object that represents that whole object. Okay. Apostrophe. We see this a lot as well. Apostrophe is just direct address. And you'll often see it with, you know, oh, my soul, or oh, God. But sometimes, and we'll see this in Proverbs, just the exclamation, my son, my sons. That's apostrophe. That's direct address, as if you are directly speaking to a particular person or thing. You know, sometimes you'll see, oh, my soul within me. That's called apostrophe. And what that does is that draws attention to the personal, intimate nature of the communication. Okay, I think we discussed this last week a little bit.
Yes.
Well, right? So apostrophe, that's something to look for. Irony, that is where the author means something different than or opposite to what he says. And we'll actually see an example of that in our poem today, where what is said, you know, something that the wicked tries to do actually results in their own destruction. All right, they try to destroy somebody else, but actually it destroys them. That's irony. Okay, a form of irony. Wordplay. This one is hard to see in English or in a translation. It's easier to see in the original language, so it's harder to find these, but that's just a word that sounds like or looks like another word that's similar to it that the author uses. Merism, that's describing the totality of something by using two contrasting or amplifying words. So from the east to the west, that describes, you know, both directions, from sunrise to sunset, the moon and the stars, night and day. Okay, these from one end to the other. These describe a totality and an encompassing of everything by describing the two extremes. Okay. Interjection, that's a word or a phrase used for emphasis. You know, behold, woe, something like that. Okay. And then an idiom. Idiom is actually fairly common. It's an expression that the actual words used don't mean what they say. Like that if you were to say he returned to dust, Well, it's not a literal statement necessarily, but it's describing someone dying, right? You might say he went into the dust, or he went to the grave. Well, that's not saying he literally walked to a grave and jumped in, right? That's describing someone who's died. So that's called an idiom. When there's an expression given that doesn't mean exactly what the word's definitions are, but it's comes up in a culture to actually describe or mean something else. And then finally, rhetorical questions. We'll see those at times. How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever? Psalm 13. Those are rhetorical questions where the answer is obvious, but they're used to sort of increase emotion and have dramatic effect, okay? Now, as I said, there are some other figures of speech that you might see, but these are the most common, okay? Any questions on those? Hopefully that's stirring up your mind a little bit to remember, I hope, some of the things we looked at before.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on these before we keep going? Okay, they're clear, I hope. Okay, well, we'll do an exercise in Proverbs 1, and that hopefully will help us remember a little bit. Now, so this second step, as I said, this will probably take longer than the other two steps because you're going to go through each verse and try to find any figures of speech. The third step is will also be, I think, fairly short. It's identify any other poetic devices that you see. Now, remember, we covered 5 additional poetic devices that aren't figures of speech, but they are used in Hebrew poetry. The inclusio, that is where a poet will begin and end with the same statement or group of words as a form of a bookend to focus attention on what is between both of those. Now that's different than the next one, which is a refrain, which you will often find at the end of a stanza. It's a repeated phrase or statement, even a verse that sort of is like a chorus in a song. And that'll usually come at the end of each stanza. Now repetition is the use of a word or words that are similar, to repeat those either within a verse or throughout the poem. Okay, we'll see a lot of repetition, lots of repetition in poetry. Ellipsis, we saw some of that last week with when we did parallelism, or last week. That's to intentionally omit a word or a phrase, but still its idea is still there. And that's used again for shortness, to shorten the verses for the artistic effect. And then Salah, that's something that we only find in Psalms. Okay, so you won't see that. You won't see Salah in the Proverbs. That is specific to the Psalms because many of the Psalms were sung, and Salah is believed to be an instruction for either the musical instruments to pause or for the speaker to pause or the song leader to pause for reflection. All right, so you won't see Salah in the Proverbs, and you won't see it in any poetry outside of the Psalms. There's a couple examples, like in Habakkuk 3, which has Salah because it is also a psalm. It takes on that form, though it's not in the book of Psalms. All right, so we do see a few psalms outside of the book of Psalms, but for the most part, all poetry outside of the Psalms, you won't see this Salah, okay? But you will see repetition, you will see refrain, you will see ellipsis, inclusio, I think maybe once in a while. All right? Any questions on that? I know this is exciting you as you're remembering all the fun we had with these poetic devices, right? You're so excited, I know, for this assignment. I know you've been waiting for this one, so. Okay, well, let's jump in and do an example passage from Proverbs. And I chose the same one that we did last week for parallelism. I'm going to ask you, brothers, to help me out and read this. Maybe we'll do a couple verses each. We can start with Pastor Ramil. If you can do verses, say, 8 through 10, and then Ruel, 11 to 13. Emmanuel, 14 to 16, and then Eric, if you could do 17 through 19. Okay, let me expand it.
Start.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Indeed, they are graceful wreath to your head, an ornament about your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent.
If they say, "Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without cause, let us swallow them alive like Sheol, even whole as those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil."
Emmanuel, you want to unmute yourself?
Throw in your lot with us. We shall all have one course. My son, do not walk in the ways with them. Keep your feet from their path, for their feet run to evil, and they hasten to shed blood.
Verse 17. Indeed, it is useless to spread the baited net in the sight of any bird, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who gains by violence. It takes away the life of its possessors.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, let's do the first step for this particular proverb, poetic text in Proverbs. And the first step is identify, the images. Okay, and we're using the New American Standard here. All right, and I already sort of identify the images, so I just put the couple of verses down that show the image, and I'm just going to ask you guys to see if what image comes to your mind as you read these verses. So, Master German, we'll start with you. As you look at verses 8 and 9, what image or picture comes to your mind here?
A father make a counseling for his son.
And what picture does he describe as he gives this counsel?
So a sort of counseling that can really put into his mind and his heart a kind of counseling that can bringing out the best of the son's life. That's
okay. All. And what I think that seems to be what he is trying to communicate, but what we're looking for is how does he communicate that? What sort of picture does he kind of like draw, basically, in order to communicate that?
A father used the life of a mother, how the mother role played a major role of this role. Give us a picture into the mind of the son of what kind of living he used to live in the present and then in the future.
Yeah, and as he tells them this, he describes something in verse 9, doesn't he? He tells them, look, right, listen to what we're telling you. Listen to our wisdom, right? And he said, our wisdom, our instruction is like something. He describes it in a picture in verse 9. Do you see that picture?
Mm.
What does he describe there to us?
Could be intense.
Medal, a reward.
Maybe a reward. He talks about three, right?
Ornaments, jewelries.
And
Yeah,
jewelries,
jewelry.
valuable.
Ornaments, about your neck. You know, that sounds kind of like a necklace, right?
Necklace.
Yes.
Now we probably, you know, later need to do a word study to understand. I think wreath is the idea of a headdress, you know, some kind of an
Garland.
ornament around your head. So it's this picture of
Something precious.
blessing, yeah, precious, and something that would bring like a reward, honor.
Valuable.
What's that?
Valuable.
Valuable, yeah. Okay. So he instead of just saying, my son, listen to what we're telling you, he says, if you do, that's like a person who's like wearing this jewelry and fine, you know, has a fine appearance, that has things of value. You know, you see what I'm talking about? There's a picture there that he's connecting to what he said in verse 8. And that picture is meant to put an image in our mind that gives us an idea of what he's saying. And I think here he's conveying this idea of blessing, reward, value, by picturing this person who's wearing a, you know, an ornate
honor,
headdress and
honorable.
a necklace. Okay, do you see that? So what we're
Yes.
looking for isn't necessarily that you're trying to interpret what he said, but just that what picture does he give, and what does that communicate? That's what we're looking for, is the picture, the description. All right.
Pastor Tim, I have a
Yeah.
question. The way the verse 9, it gives us already a cultural background at the time that
Yeah.
if you wear this kind of ornaments or wreath, you're an honorable person, or
Yeah, you would have to figure out, okay, you know, what would this picture, what would come to the mind of the original audience with this picture? Is he talking like in the Greek culture? If you talk about a wreath, you're actually talking about an award
athletic
for an
award,
athletic event. But that's a Greek mindset. All right, this is they didn't have Olympics in ancient Israel. All right, so
Yes.
so you have to be specific to the culture that it's written to. All right, because Paul talks about a wreath, and I think Christ does as well, a crown in Revelation. And the idea there is sort of that when an athlete won an event, he would go up to this judgment seat and receive the reward, which was this you know, wreath for the head. But that's not what's being described here. Okay, this is written 1,000 years before that in a different culture. So you would want to understand, okay, what is this graceful wreath that he's talking about? And I think it's this idea of a head ornament or head jewelry or fashion, something like that. Okay. So that's where we got to be careful. Remember, it's the original audience that we want to, that you know, what would they understand this picture to mean? Not what, you know, a later culture might think it means. Okay? And these
Okay.
ornaments about your neck, you know, what would that convey? What would that communicate? Would that talk about, does that mean blessing, success, beauty? You see, you need to do a little bit of research to understand that. Okay, let's look at another image. And we'll have Kent, we'll go ahead and have you on this one, verses 10 to 12. What picture do you see described here? You're muted right now.
Give an advice or warning.
Okay. Now again, what image does he give us to convey that warning? What's the picture he draws? There's
give us
actually a couple. of them.
a convey yes like a murder or
Yeah.
a warfare that ambush without no idea, or that verse 11, and in verse 12 is give us like uh like a hell or like a grave that that you will suck or in the in the grave if you entice with the sinners.
Yeah, he describes like this
Living in hell.
what's that?
Living in hell.
Almost, or like I think here's the grave is probably the emphasis, like but you know, like death takes everybody, right?
Mm.
And like everyone dies, everyone goes to the grave, and so it's like described here like, you know, maybe a giant creature that's just swallows everything, nothing can escape it. And so they're so it's sort of again emphasizes this ambush will be a, like, you know, I just pictured a group of guys, you know, if someone's walking along and then this group of guys just jump on them and you can't see the guy anymore. It's like they swallowed him up, right? Because there's so many and it's such a fierce attack. I think that's the picture that came to my mind with this. And that would be something that, right, Jesus, remember, he gave a parable about something like this, right? You remember the Good Samaritan parable?
Yes.
And the guy walking, you know, up to Jerusalem, and then this band of robbers, right, attacks him and leaves him for dead. So I think this wouldn't, you know, this sort of image would not be, it would be something familiar to these people, you know, especially if you're by yourself and you're walking along and there's this group, there'd be these groups of robbers who would attack. And so this picture here is this group waiting, and there's so many, and they're just gonna like totally swarm over this guy, like swallow him up. So it's like a fierce attack that's being described. Okay. Does that make sense? Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Like just like what they call the soil that is soft soil that you swallow slowly,
Uh-huh.
that you cannot what do you call that, with wet mud or
Oh yeah. That kind of just
Quicksand.
covers over.
with sand that you can you quicksand.
Yeah.
Quicksand.
Yeah, quicksand. Yeah, that's a good. See, you're describing with another picture. Yeah, that's good. So when we say quicksand, what comes to your mind right away? You know, you see a person kind of sinking, right? And then all of a sudden he's gone. Well, that's
Yes.
sort of what's described here. That this guy's walking along and these guys are saying, hey, let's wait. We're going to jump on this guy. And there's so many of us, we're just going to, you know, swallow him up. You're not, it's going to be this, you know, strong, overwhelming attack. All right. Okay, good. Let's look at verse 13, 14 here. Eric, how about, can you do that? What picture do you see being described here? And what?
Precious wealth.
Okay, what about it? What, again, think picture. Think picture.
Riches.
Yeah, he's describing riches, but what's the picture that he's drawing for us?
Acquiring
Blessing.
Wealth, riches.
Okay, acquiring wealth, and what image is being used to convey that? Notice he says, what is that visual? How would you describe that as a visually? What is that I just highlighted?
A house full of treasure.
Stolen.
Acquired during war.
Okay,
Appellees.
and then
Appellees.
okay,
Fill our houses with useless.
yeah. What's the picture? It's a house full of stuff, right? He's
Pastor Tim,
like,
stolen. Stolen
yeah, it's
goods.
stolen, but he's describing that, look, we're going to take so much stuff, we're going to fill our houses with it. So the picture is, you know, a house full of these things that have been stolen, right? He calls precious wealth. So you kind of, if you close your eyes, you think, you know, he's describing a place where they've got all of this, you know, coins and valuable jewelry and clothing and, you know, all kinds of.
It could be a warehouse, Pastor Tim, a warehouse full of precious stuff.
Yeah. So that he's describing, you know, what they've stolen, but he's describing it in such a way as like, we're gonna get all kinds of, it's gonna fill our houses up with stuff that we've taken. All right. And so they're saying we'll all have this great pile of, you know, wealth. That's
World Bank.
Yeah.
An ill-gotten wealth, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, and that's what it is. But again, I want you guys to focus on the picture, the image, the description of how, because yeah, he's talking here about stuff, things that they've stolen, ill-gotten gain, right? Booty, you know, but he's not just describing that. They're trying to say we're going to have so much of it, you know, our houses will be filled up with it. Okay, that's the picture. All right, because that's conveying something more than just, it's not just that we're going to take all this stuff, it's that he gives a picture to describe how much of it is. Like it's going to be just, you know, we're going to be rich because our houses are going to be filled up. So the picture is a house filled up with stuff.
Pastor
Question?
Tim,
Yeah.
yeah, I saw this sort of documentary in YouTube about people in the US who are hoarders. Their
Yeah.
house is really full of stuff, but only useless stuff. This is a kind of an opposite to it, but that's,
Yeah.
I think, the picture.
Yeah, my mind was like, I forget what movie I was watching. It was some pirate movie, and you sort of went into this cave, and you just see treasure all over the cave. You know, it was like piles and well, Lord of the Rings, right? You remember?
Yes.
Or no, Hobbit. I'm sorry. The dragon. I forgot his name. already.
Aladdin as well.
But right, the Hobbit goes into the dragon, the castle, and he's like, the dragon's sitting on this pile of gold, right? It's just filled up. And so the picture, that's the kind of the picture came in my mind is, you know, they're describing just how much they're going to take, so much that, you know, they'll open their house door and you'll see all this wealth just piled up in their house. So that, so, you know, he could have said it this way. He could have said, we will get lots of money. That's what they're conveying, but the thing is how are they describing that in a picture? And the picture is fill our houses. Spoil, meaning we're just picture your house is going to be full of wealth, full of great stuff. Okay, that's the picture, that's the image. All right. Let's see. Where are we at now? Kenneth, why don't you take this one? verses 15 and 16. Kenneth, can you describe the what image or picture do we see there from Solomon?
Like a dangerous road that must not be taken. A
Yeah,
dark alley, like a place where there are people who are members of gang, something like that.
yeah. I kind of sorry. I guess Lord of the Rings was on my mind, but I don't know if you remember that scene where Aragorn is going to go into that cave where all those skulls are. I don't know if you guys remember the movie, but sort of it's an ominous image as the camera looks down this sort of scary path between,
Yes.
you know, scary road ahead. So it was kind of that picture came to my mind. So Solomon's saying, don't go that way. That's a scary place to avoid. Okay. Yeah, that's the idea.
It's like a road of robbers.
Road of robbers. Yep. Stay away from it. Okay. One more picture. Pastor Salito, Pastor Boyd, if you're there, can you, what's being described here in verse 17? Are you there? Pastor Boyd, are you there? Maybe he's taking a break. Edwin, how about you? Are you there? Maybe they're together. They're plotting to fill their houses with spoil. Maybe that's what they're doing. All right. See who else can do this one.
Pastor Tim, for the
Yeah.
second time, in
You
the
wanna try?
sight of in the sight of any bird means innocence. The idea of innocence in the sight of any bird.
Yeah. What's the picture being described here?
The baited net.
Putting a net out to catch a bird, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just and kind of what he's saying is if you show the bird the net, you're not gonna catch them because they're not gonna fly into the net if they see it. It's kind of the idea, right? But so the picture though is throwing out this net, but doing it so that the bird sees you. Okay, and what he's going to do is contrast that with verse 18, because no bird would be stupid enough to go into a net if they see the net. But then in verse 18, what he says is, but by these evil guys doing this, they actually are more dumb than that bird, because by what they are doing, they're actually destroying themselves. You know, even a bird would not go into a net that it sees. But these guys, they're being dumb and foolish by taking this course of action in their life. And as a result, it's going to end up destroying them. Okay. We'll talk more about that when we look at figures of speech in a minute. But the thing I wanted you to see was just this image here of the net being thrown out and that the bird actually sees it. I guess that's how they would catch birds in those days. Okay, so those are some of the images that are given and described in this poem. The next step is to now identify the figurative language in the poem. Again, and let me just reiterate, repeat a couple things. You know, these images, they're meant to give emphasis. They're meant to express a particular emotion or a particular instruction but to do so in a way that it would be more vivid in your mind. So like, for example, going back to this description of the houses being filled with this wealth, I mean, again, it's the intent is, hey, these guys are trying to convince a person to, hey, come with us, we're gonna make lots of money, we're gonna get so much wealth that it's gonna fill up our houses. So there's using a picture in order to communicate that emphasis. Okay, so that's why we're looking for these pictures, because they tell us a story about what the poet's trying to show us. Now, figurative language, it's helpful to see, okay, what particular figures of speech does the poet use in order to communicate these particular things? Because through those figures of speech, that's what helps us to see what is being emphasized, what is being given the focus. Okay, so let's start back up with Brother Ruel here and ask you what poetic, what figurative figures of speech do you see here?
I see interjection, Pastor Tim.
Okay,
Where?
where?
My son.
My son. That can be an interjection or apostrophe, right? Direct address, apostrophe.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, that conveys is personal, emotional, intimate, right? This is a father to his son, you know, giving him warning. Okay, good. You see anything else? That's all I saw on this one.
Yeah,
actually.
nothing else.
Okay, since this was so easy, we'll give you verse 9 also. All right.
Okay.
What do you see in verse 9?
I see metaphor.
Okay, what is the metaphor?
Instructions are likened to graceful wreath and ornaments.
Okay, instruction, teaching is described as a wreath. And actually, there's another metaphor, right? He does two metaphors.
Ornaments.
Yeah, ornaments. Okay, described as an ornament. And notice it's a metaphor because he says they are a graceful wreath. All right, so it's a stronger comparison. If he had said they are like a graceful wreath, what is that called?
Simile.
Simile. Okay, it's a weaker comparison than a metaphor. Okay, so here a metaphor is given a strong comparison. Okay, good. You see anything else, Ruel?
I see nothing else.
Okay, I didn't either. It's good. All right, Eric, we're going to give you verse 10. What figures of speech do you see here, Brother Eric?
Interjection, my son.
Yeah, interjection or apostrophe. It's direct address here. But, you know, it's also, you know, interjection is also could be, you know,
Behold.
Yeah. But I think because he says my son, it's personal. That's why I would take it more as a direct address. He's not just exclaiming something, but he's actually, you know, speaking to someone. So that's why I think apostrophe is a better.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? I didn't see anything, but do you? I think that's all that we have there. Why don't you take verse 11 as well? You see anything in verse 11, Eric? How about this? Remember what I mentioned to you guys before too. If you're not sure if there's a figure of speech, just ask yourself, does the statement make sense if it was literal? Okay, does the statement make sense if it was literal? So for example, if they say, come with us, do you think that's meant literally?
Yes.
It is. Let us lie in wait for blood. So are they going to sit there and wait for blood to come? Is that what they mean?
No.
Figurative.
That's figurative. How is it figurative?
Wordplay.
It represents a response of the whole.
Substitution.
It's a substitution, right? They're not saying we're waiting for literal blood to come by. They're waiting to do something, right?
To people to do something.
Yeah, I think it's a metonymy, meaning where blood represents violence,
Innocent people.
harm, perhaps even murder. Okay? Yeah, of a person. So it's not that they're waiting there, waiting for blood to show up. They're waiting for someone to come that they're going to attack and perhaps even kill. Okay? So that's the figure of speech there. Okay, so just ask yourself, read the line and say, okay, is this a literal statement? Does he mean this literally? They're going to lie down in the road and wait for blood to show up. Okay? Well, no, that's not it. They're actually waiting to attack. And actually, if we think about this expression, lie in wait, are they literally lying down on the ground waiting? No, that's an idiom. What does he mean?
Hiding.
Yeah, maybe
Hiding.
Hiding. Yes.
Yeah. Preparing for an ambush.
Sneak.
Sneaky, good. Yeah. Okay. So you see that? Now, if he had said, like in the next line, he says, let us ambush the innocent. Now, is that literal? Do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He means it.
Literal.
So there's nothing figurative there because the words that he uses are actually what is meant. Let us ambush, right? Let us hide and then attack some innocent person who's coming by. So that's what is the literal description. The figurative description is given right above it. Okay? And so there's a repetition and this use of figurative language in order to emphasize the, the word, the dastardly, sort of this evil, wicked intent. And that this figurative language, helps draw that out. Okay. All right, Eric, do you see any others here in verse 11? Anybody see any others? I didn't catch any, but that doesn't mean there might not be something else. Okay, let's move on. Verse 12. Kent, why don't you go ahead and take this one? What figures of speech do you see here in verse 12?
Metaphor.
Okay, what's the metaphor?
Follow them like.
Yeah. Well, here, is it a metaphor or is it a simile?
The simile, line 1.
Simile, yeah. Swallow like Sheol. Okay. So that's a simile. Any other figures of speech?
But the swallow, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, what is that?
I do not know. I forgot the types of.
Okay, well,
figure of
swallow.
speech.
Swallow is a human characteristic. So it's applying a human characteristic to either to an inanimate object or to an animal. So that's called personification. Okay.
There's also another simile.
Okay. What is that?
Those
As
Second
those,
line,
as
as those.
who go down, as those who go down the pit.
All right, good. Simile. As those who go down to the pit. All right. So let us swallow. Yeah, go ahead.
Even whole, Pastor Tim. The even whole sounds to me like a hyperbole.
Maybe. Yeah, I would put a question mark there, even whole. Like maybe that's an exaggeration, you know, sort of just, they're going to be completely consumed. Again, notice this is not literal. They're not saying, hey, let's ambush this person and then eat them, right? Swallow here is not describing him eating. It's this idea of a picture of, you know, them being overwhelmed. Like when you swallow something, it goes in and it's all gone. So that's the idea. Let's see. So that's what I see actually, that expression, swallow them alive, is an idiom really, because he's not meaning to literally swallow them, but it's an idiom representing maybe surrounding the person, right? Complete attack, something like that.
Substitution.
Okay. Any others?
The pit.
The pit.
Yeah. Does it represent like, what is that, death or something like that?
Yeah, it could be metonymy represents the grave, death, perhaps. Okay, like Sheol. It's the same thing. So notice this verse has a number of figures of speech here. Okay. All right, let's look at verse 13. Brother Emmanuel, why don't you go ahead and do this one, verse 13. Let me pull it up here. I can get it. Okay. Brother Emmanuel, what figures of speech do you see here? Are you there? Boy, I guess everybody's going to the CR right now. Edwin, are you there? Did you come back yet? You with us? How about you, Macdo? Are you there?
Yes, Pastor Tim.
Ah, great to hear from you. Good morning.
Good morning.
How about you want to give a try on verse 13? Do you see any figures of speech here?
I think the all kinds.
Okay, what is that?
Hyperbole.
Yeah, I think so. Or definitely, right? We will fill our houses. I think that's hyperbole as well, right? Does he literally mean that the house is going to be, you know, totally stuffed with wealth? No, I think that's hyperbole, right? That he's exaggerating to make a point, right? They're trying to entice this person to come sin with them. So to do that, they're going to exaggerate. Look, we're going to make all this money, right? So much wealth that, you know, our house is going to be full of this wealth. So that, I think hyperbole is correct. Do you see any others in verse 13?
Pastor Tim, verse 13, can it be also a literal?
Well, I think, again, to fill their house, they said fill our houses. So they're saying every one of them in the group's going to have so much spoil from robbery that their houses are going to be overflowing with this. And I think that's exaggerating. He's like, they're exaggerating. So that's hyperbole. So they are literally going to take spoil and, you know, keep it, but the hyperbole is how much spoil. And they're saying like all kinds will fill our houses. So they're exaggerating here.
Pastor Tim.
Yeah.
The kinds is italic, so it's include in our making a figure of speech.
Yeah, I think they're literally, it's literally, we will find all precious wealth. Okay. That word kinds, yeah, is just added for clarification, but I think if you take it literally, we will find all precious wealth, right? You can see that's an exaggeration.
The hyperbole is much stronger with the word kind.
Yeah.
All precious.
Yep. Okay. Macdo, do you see any other figures of speech in verse 13?
None.
Yeah.
Okay.
No
Yeah, I
worries.
don't either. Why don't you do verse 14, Macdo? What do you see there? Verse 14. Any figures of speech?
Throw in your lot with us. Throw in your lot with us.
Okay, what is that? Does he mean that literally?
Is it
Like
an idiom?
Yeah, idiom. Good. Very good. Yeah, that's an idiom. Throw in your lot is an idiom because he doesn't mean to take your, you know, your dice, you know, and throw them, but it's this expression which means, you know, come with us, do this with us. Okay. Very good. Do you see anything else here? We shall all have one purse. Now, does he mean that literally? Like we'll all have one, you know, collection or bag of
I think-
Metonymy.
maybe metonymy?
Or idiom still.
Yeah, let's let Macdo take a shot at this first. What do you think, Macdo?
He just left.
See, you guys offended him. You were answering for him, and so he said, forget it.
Because you can't wait for him.
Okay, somebody else. I heard someone say idiom. How might that be an idiom?
Kenneth.
Which means what? What's the expression here referring to?
Yeah. Maybe he means to say let's all have one source of
Unity.
income, something like that.
Maybe
Yeah.
we'll all share the
Yeah.
the money.
Yeah.
I think it's the idea.
One bank account.
One bank account, yeah. And we know how that works among robbers, right? One guy kills all the rest of them so he can have it, but okay. Well, Kenneth, since you're so excited to do these, I'll give you one, all right? How about verse 15?
Apostrophe, first line.
Yeah, okay, again, we have apostrophe. Notice, you guys should see the repetition already, right? He's repeated my son 3 times in this section. What does that tell you, by the way? For him to repeat this in verse 8, my son, verse 10, my son, verse 15, my son. What does
Emphasis.
that convey? There's an emphasis,
Emphasis.
strong appeal, right?
Yeah. Plead.
Almost a pleading of a father.
So concerned with
Yeah.
his son.
So, and I bring this up because then if you're preaching this passage, you want to convey that. Like there's an earnestness here, right? This is like important. Son, don't listen to these guys. Don't go their direction. Don't follow in their path. You know, it's this strong concern. Okay. That's why we're identifying these figures of speech, because those, when we do that, it also is telling us sort of the emotion in the poem and the, you know, what the poet is emphasizing and how he's conveying that emotion. Anything else in verse 15 that you see, Kenneth?
I'm not sure, but I think it's metonymy.
Okay, what is that? What is the metonymy?
Yeah, but I think also it's literal. Keep
Okay,
your
so-
feet from their path.
Yeah, keep your feet from their path. Yeah, in a sense, it could be literal, but it also could be an idiomatic expression.
Something their way of life.
Yeah, don't
Don't go their way.
don't go their way.
Don't be like them.
Yeah, don't be like them. Don't participate in their actions. So to do that would mean you would have to walk along with them, but I think the idea is more than just that. He's not just saying don't, you know, stay away from their path that they walk. It's the idea is don't go and participate in their activities with them. Okay? And that really, even the statement above could probably seen that way as well. So I would see this possibly as an idiom, though there is some literal aspect to it. Okay, and the same kind of idiom in the next. Anything else, Kenneth, that you see?
None, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, I don't either. Anybody else see anything here in verse 15?
If you don't say anything, we can't say anything.
Hey, I don't catch it everything, all right? I do these because you guys often see things that I didn't see as well. So, okay, verse 16. Emmanuel, are you back? Are you back with us? Did you come back from your CR break? Are you there, Emmanuel? Yeah. Do you want to give
Yes.
verse 16 a try? Do you see any figures of speech here?
Oh, their feet.
So again, just consider, okay, look at the first line. For their feet run to evil. Is that sort of meant literally? Or is that an expression that is
Idiom.
No, if
Idiom.
maybe an idiom?
Pastor Tim, is it not
Idiom.
synecdoche?
Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let me just type this. Their feet run to evil. Okay, what would be the synecdoche?
The feet represents the whole person.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable, because, right, and we actually had this in the last one, didn't we? Keep your feet from their path. So there was one there that we didn't catch. Okay, I think feet is a synecdoche, because he's not saying he's not just saying their feet only, right? It's not the picture of just their feet going, but their feet takes their body with them, right? So
Right.
this is synecdoche. Represents the feet, represents the whole person. Okay. All right. So see, you guys did catch one that I missed. So that I think is the case here as well. I don't know if I even spelled that right. Synecdoche. Maybe it's, yeah, there we go. Okay, anything else, Emmanuel, that you see here in verse 16? What's that? I see one other thing here. This idea of shed blood.
Yes, shed blood.
Represent murder.
Yeah, I think
Metonymy.
that's an idiom that represents murder or violence. Okay. Okay, anything else anybody sees? That's all I found there, verse 16. Now, I didn't see anything in verse 17 here. Maybe you guys might spot something. Did anybody see anything in verse 17 here? I mean, I think maybe indeed. That be an interjection, maybe? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess maybe there is something. But it is useless to spread the baited nets. I mean, I think that's a literal statement. In the sight of any bird, I don't think there's any symbolism there. I think he's literally saying it's dumb, it's vain to put a net out so the bird can see it. I think that's, I don't think there's any figures of speech here. Anybody see anything? Okay, we've already, verse 18 is going to have the same as back in verse 11. Okay, it's saying the same thing, right? Let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush. So it's going to be the same figures of speech there. Verse 19, it's our last verse. And let's see, does anybody see any figures of speech in verse 19?
Simile, first line.
So are the ways, okay, simile. Oh, actually, well, is it a metaphor, or it would be a metaphor because it's the word are, but what is being compared? And is the comparison figurative?
The ways.
Ace, and then
The ways are what, though?
who gains.
So the ways are basically verse 18.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah, let me think about that. That could be. there's one thing I see here, and you have to actually look at verses 17 through 19 to see it. Let me pull verse 17 down. And let's see if you guys see it. When you look at these verses together, verse 19 actually presents another poetic device. You guys see it? Think about what he's saying here. Notice verse 18 sounds like, right? Remember verse 11? I'll just copy it, bring it down. Okay, let me put verse 11 here. Notice verse 11 is what they were saying, trying to entice someone to sin with them, right? And they're saying, come with us. Let's hide and to hurt somebody so that we can take their money. Let us ambush the innocent. And then verse 18, what does Solomon say actually will happen?
It's an ironic statement that
it's ironic. Yeah. Actually, so really verse 18 there's an irony here. Isn't there? Compared to what they say in verse 11.
They're ambushing themselves.
Yeah, they are planning to ambush someone else and hurt them, when in the end, Solomon says they are actually going to be ambushed and hurt themselves. It's kind of like, you remember Haman in the book of Esther?
Yes.
You remember that story? And Haman, what does Haman do, right? He hates Mordecai so much.
Mordecai made a pole.
Yeah.
Was hung on gallows.
He made this gallows to hang Mordecai, and actually Haman is the one that ended up being hung on them. So that's an irony, right? Well, this is the irony. Solomon says, look, these people were plotting to hurt somebody else, but in the end, they're only hurting themselves.
Very true.
Okay? So it's a principle of wisdom, but it's presented in the form of an irony.
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess really probably verse 18 would be where that irony is specifically. But then verse 19, maybe, yeah, you could say it's sort of maybe a metaphor in a sense. Okay. All right, well, I know that took some time, right? And as I said, this will probably take you the most time for your passage, but hopefully that exercise sort of reminded you of the different kinds of figures of speech. And these are important because seeing this irony is an important poetic device to recognize, because it really, notice it comes at the end of the stanza, right? If we were to look back at this passage one more time, and we would see that, let me just get the whole here we go. So Solomon here, right, he's warning his sons. He's giving this earnest warning. Hear, my son, if sinners entice you, my son, do not walk. And so verses 8 and 9, he gives this exhortation to listen, and then the illustration of it. And then verses 10 through 14 is sort of the enticement of the sinners, and they're saying, hey, come on with us. We're gonna go rob these people. We're gonna wait for them and hurt them and take all their money and have all of these riches. And then verse 15 to 19 is Solomon's again, warning, don't go their way. And then verses 17 to 19 is, look, if you go their direction, actually what they're planning is what will happen to them. So don't do it. So do you see how the structure of this part of the poem? And he goes on to talk more in verse 20 about wisdom and wisdom crying out to them. But this is the structure here of these verses. And then within them, these figures of speech, especially that irony, is important to see. Okay, are there any questions on the figures of speech and what we did? Hopefully that makes sense.
None, Pastor Tim.
Okay. Everyone else okay? All right. The third step is after you do the figures of speech, let me get down to it, is identify other poetic devices. All right, and we can just do this quickly for the sake of time. There's no inclusio here. There's no refrain. There's no repeated chorus or anything. Again, this isn't a song. There is one example of ellipsis in where was it? I think verse 9. If I can go up to it real quick. If you look at verse 9, yeah, he says, "Indeed, they are a graceful wreath to your head," and then he leaves out in the second line, "they are," but it's implied that it's there. Okay, so there is ellipsis there. Not that significant, but just it's important to note. Sometimes the ellipsis can be pretty significant. So we'll just note that here, verse 9. Repetition. All right. Do we see any repetition in this poem? Again, let's look back at the poem here and identify.
My son.
Yes, definitely my son is repeated. So let's go down here.
Actions and teaching.
Verse 11, Pastor Tim.
All right, hold on a second. So we have my son. That's in verse 8 and 10, 15. Okay, what else did you guys find that's repeated?
Verse 11.
Instruction and teaching.
Okay, instruction. I'll just do this. Instruction, teaching in verse 8. Anything else?
Blood is repeated few times.
Blood. What verses is blood in?
11, 16, 18.
Okay, good. And even violence, we could add to that, right? Again, we also are not looking just for the exact same word, but even similar words. Violence is in verse 19.
The word feet, Pastor Tim.
Which word?
Feet.
Feet, good. And actually,
16.
Okay, verse 15 and 16. And actually, we could probably add, the concept of walk, path, and way, right? Those are all similar ideas. So we see that a number of times, I think 4 times in verse 15, verse 16.
Verse 11, Pastor Tim. Verse 11.
What's in verse 11?
With us lie in wait and with us ambush.
Okay, yeah. So we have lie in wait, ambush. We see those both in verse 11 and also again in verse 18, right? Anything else? How about wealth? Spoil, purse, gain. Right, we see that in verse 13, 14, and then gain is mentioned in 19, right? Or gains.
So, Pastor Tim, related words can be considered as a repetition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
if they are referring to the same idea, or like, so like, for example, wealth, spoil, purse, okay, gains, these all refer to the same thing. And remember, in poetry, synonyms are often used just for the sake of artistic quality, right? Because if you see the same word every time, that's not that artistic. So synonyms are often used to express the same concept, but in a different way. Okay. So I don't know. Anyone see anything else? I think that's good. I mean, I guess you could say let us, right, in verses 11 and 12.
Let us, and we will.
And we will. Yeah, verses 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah.
We shall.
What's that?
We shall.
We shall.
Yeah, we shall. Yeah. And sometimes it's
Will.
helpful if you've got, you know, you highlight them in the same color. Sometimes it can draw, you know, doing that can. So what did we have? Lion weight. You guys see anything else while I'm doing this? You can.
Pastor Tim,
verse 10, do not consent, and then verse 15, keep your feet from the path.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, Pastor Tim. The negative commands of the Father.
Do not consent, and then what was the other one? Do not walk.
Do not walk.
Verse 15, keep your feet from the path.
Yeah, keep your feet. Okay, good. That's verses 10, 15. Okay, good. So we had blood, right? Blood was repeated. Blood, blood, violence, blood. Okay. So sometimes that can be helpful to call my son. That was another one, right? My son. All right. You guys see any others?
Pit and Sheol.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do that. I mean, they're in the same verse, so sometimes just because there's parallelism, it's really more, look for ones that you see sort of across more than one verse. You know, repetition in the poem as a whole. Okay.
16, verse 13, run and hasten.
Okay, yeah, run and hasten. Again, those are in the same verse, so
We can include that in feet, Pastor Tim, feet, walk, pathway.
yeah, maybe so. Run, hasten. Okay, those would all go together. Let's see. Feet. So we'll use, I guess, this color. Okay. Hasten, feet, walk, way, path. See, in this way, when you do the colors, you can kind of see if there's something that's spread out or more grouped. All right. Okay, well, I think that's good. I think we caught most everything there. All right, so again, this step is meant to, it's a way to analyze the poem that, again, we're getting more and more familiar with it. And this exercise not only will help us see maybe certain figures of speech that are being used for emotion, for emphasis, for focus, but also too, we're getting more familiar with the passage and we're spending time in it, looking at it from a different point of view. The first step, or the previous step, we were looking at parallelism. So we're analyzing each line and comparing it to the other line in each verse. Now we're looking at figures of speech and poetic devices. So we're looking at the passage from another angle. And doing all these steps really helps us to get a further understanding, give us more insights into the text, get us more familiar with it. So there's different objectives being fulfilled. There's different goals being fulfilled by doing each of these steps in the process. Because sometimes you may be doing a step and thinking, what am I doing? This doesn't seem to be helping me that much. How would I preach? How's this helping me preach the poem? But what it's doing is helping you to become more familiar with it and to see certain things from in a way you may not have seen them before. Okay, so it's just forcing you to look at this from one direction, and then another step in the process forces you to look at it from another direction. Okay, and then when we do word studies, and things like that, you'll be seeing things from even another perspective. So, okay.
Okay.
All right. Any questions on this, or do you have any specific questions about your passage while we're together? All right. Well, I'll take that to mean you're ready to be done this morning. All right.
Yes.
All right. Hopefully that little review was a helpful review to remind us of some of these steps that we did for your Psalms passage. Again, I don't think these steps will take too long. I don't think this assignment should take you too long, so I would jump on it this week. Try to get it done for your passage. I mean, look at how much time we spent on that. Was 12 verses, and I think most of you, your passages are 6, 7, 8 verses, so they're not as long. So it shouldn't take you as long to do this assignment for your passage. Okay.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Thank
Right.
you. Okay.
Well, Kent, why don't we ask you to close us in prayer, and we'll be praying for you and your church with that nobody else tests positive for this, and
Yes. Thank you,
Lord's
Pastor Tim.
protection over you. But can you go ahead and close us tonight?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father and gracious God, we thank you and we honor you, Lord, for this great privilege that you're giving us, Lord, that as your slave in Christ, even, Lord, you provide us, Lord, a teacher, oh God, that you're being used for us, that we may learn how to interpret or study your word, oh God, because it's important, Lord, especially, Lord, that Lord, it gives understanding to the